of colonized education are still alive and well. It is easy to forget that we who are present in this room and who have had the advantage of education, whether at home or in different countries outside of the continent, still labor under the burden of neo-colonialized education. And when one appreciates that, one will then be able to understand why so many years after we regained our political independence, our education still continues to suffer. And when you travel across the continent of Africa and read the history of education, you will discover that the history of education in Africa as known now was also a history of disruption of education in our countries. Whether you are in India, your education was disrupted by the British colonizer. If you are in Cameroon, your education was disrupted by the French colonizer. If you are in Rwanda, your education was disrupted by the Belgian colonizer. If you are in Somalia, your education was disrupted by the Italian colonizer. If you are in South Africa, your education was initially disrupted by the Dutch colonizer, confused by the English colonizer, and continues to be confused by them. And if you are in Namibia, your education was disrupted by the German colonizer. And that even when we regained independence, that has not changed. In fact, when you look at the early schools that were established in Africa, if you are in Nigeria, the first formal school that was established was in 1843 by the Methodists. And it was informed by a culture that was a mixture of religion and British culture. And those who are older or courtesy of history will remember how you are taught how London was burning. You are taught how Humpty Dumpty sat on a wall. That is what you are taught. Those of you who are in former French colonies, you'll remember in morning parades when you of the Negroid color were told to recite that your ancestors were the Gauls. That is not too long ago. And therefore, that is the context in which we must understand our education. When our universities were established, they were made in the image of the colonizer. So that when the University of Ibadan in Nigeria was established, it was a replica of the University of London. When the University of Nairobi was established at the Royal College, it was a replica of the University of London. And when you sat examination, you sat the Cambridge examination set in Cambridge. That is the history which is uncomfortable, which you and me who are still laboring under neo-colonial education sometimes find irritating. But it's my duty to irritate you. I irritate you because it is necessary for us to be irritated into positive action. When we regained independence, many of the first independence leaders recognized that education was critical, and the kind of education that we regained was going to determine how we were going to progress economically and otherwise. And I suspect that many of them had read works that had been undertaken by their predecessors. Those from the United States of America will remember the very celebrated book written in 1933 by Carter G. Woodson, Miseducation of the Negro. Carter G. Woodson had recognized at that time as an educator that the education that the Negro were being subjected to amounted to nothing but miseducation and indoctrination. You remember him speaking about that kind of education as education that disorients and paralyzes. Kwame Nkrumah, having attended Lincoln College, must have read Carter G. Woodson. And that is why in 1961, when he is presiding over the establishment of the Kwame Nkrumah University of Science and Technology in Kumasi in Ghana, he says that one of the things we must do as Africans is to use education to create a new African man and a new African woman who will think differently, and that universities must be structured in a way that they change our minds. He says almost the same thing in 1961 on the occasion of the inauguration of the University of Ghana at Legon. And he says almost the same thing when he establishes the University of Education in Winneba, reminding Africans at that time that education was at the very heart of the change of societies. And he was not alone in that regard. Julius Kambarage Nyerere, speaking in 1966, reminds his audience, why is it that when we are educated, the education is designed in such a manner that it makes us run away from ourselves? Why is it that when they teach us geography, they teach us about the prairies and the pampas? Why is it that they teach us things that have no meaning to our lives? Singing about it a little later, fella Nicola Pokuti says, "Teacher, don't teach me nonsense." He is simply reminding us that education really is the single thing that is going to determine how we move and in which direction that we move. And you can go to any part of Africa in the 1960s. All leaders are talking about education. You are from the Gambia, can remember Dauda Kairaba Jawara talking about education. You are from Zambia, will remember Kenneth David Kaunda on the occasion of the founding of the University of Zambia, what he says about education. You from Malawi will remember Kamuzu Hastings Banda talking about education and the reason why education must be different. You from Uganda will remember Apollo Milton Obote and Kabaka Sir Edward Mutesa talking about education on the occasion that Makerere University is being reoriented to address East African problems in the same way that Jomo Kenyatta was in Kenya. Education, no doubt, is the fountain from which we drink in order to revolutionize society. But which kind of education? Those of you from India who are familiar with the great Hindu epic, the Mahabharata, will remember Sage Vyas saying that education, it is not that which does not change you inside out. It is not education change your mind. Today you are gathered here as experts, renowned in your own fields, talking about assessment. And assessment in Africa, which is my focus, But we must ask ourselves, what was the raison d'etre of education when it was introduced into this part of the world? When I look at many of the schools that were established by the colonialists, the design was to create an African who was numerate and literate, to be an instrument for the colonial administration. It may be denied, but I want you to read at the history of King's College Budo in Uganda and how they taught. I want you to read the history of Achimota College in Ghana and how they taught. I want you to read about Alliance School in Kenya and how they taught. And all these schools had one agenda: to mold you into an instrument. The old saying is still true. Once you've created a puppet, you can never worry how he or she is going to think. It's predictable. Today, even after many years, and I see it, you find a Kenyan who has obtained his or her undergraduate degree at the University of Nairobi, obtains a master's degree at the University of Nairobi, obtains a PhD degree from the University of Nairobi, and for 2 weeks visits for a 2-week course at the University of Harvard. He then says, Harvard trained. The inferiority complex is still alive and well, which tells you that our education is still designed to make us think as inferiors. And I'm submitting to you that until the day that we reorient our minds, the education that we are offering to our young men and women is not going to change the African continent in the dramatic manner that we want her to be changed. You know, I am a trained lawyer. And sometimes, when I look at the law and our education system, oh, we were colonized by the British. And when I appear in a land case in Kenya involving 2 Kenyans, the case that I still cite is a British decision in 1896. And when I appear, I still wear a wig that they wore in feudal England. And when I appear before judges, they still dress like Father Christmas, as they did in England. Talk about total domination of our mind and psyche. It is alive and well. And you can go to any profession. So we are talking assessment today, but what are we assessing? Over the years, we have always recognized that we needed to change our education. Many Kenyans who are here will remember that in 1963 we had regained independence. And at that time, before we regained independence, we had only one university, the University of East Africa. And there was a commission headed by an individual called Beecher, who was a missionary. He is the one who created the education system in East Africa, Kenya, Uganda, and Tanzania at that time. I invite you to read the Beecher Commission. When we started splitting the University of East Africa into Makerere University, University of Dar es Salaam, and University of Nairobi in Kenya, just to show you how confused we are. We started in 1964 with the Ominde Commission. Ominde said this thing, how we ought to reform education. 1 year later, we were reforming our education again with the Gashadi Commission. Oh, and we did not stop there. A few years later, we came with the Mackay Commission. Mackay came all the way from Canada to tell us that we needed an 844 system, and we did not stop there. A few years later, we came with the Koech Commission, which we never implemented. A few years later, we came with yet another commission, the Odhiambo Commission, which we never implemented. A few years later, again, we came with yet another commission, which we never implemented. Now we have the Munavu Commission, which we are implementing without interrogation. Raw. And you who are experts here, you are silent. You are telling the government officials, oh, you are our demigod, whatever you say is true. Let us stop being cowards. The problem of Africa are professionals who are cowards. Professionals who don't want to interrogate politicians. And that is the problem of Africa. We professionals, we academics, we are cowards. And we have allowed individuals who have no idea of what education is to be the ones who are controlling education. In 60 years, Kenya has had no less than 6 commissions. Our education and our grading system is confusing and confused at once. So when we are talking about grading and assessment, we are stuck. You know, sometimes I feel pain when I look at us. Today, in Africa, whether it is in West, where you have your YX, or in East, when we are talking about science, STEM, do you know who sponsors STEM in Kenya? Or in Uganda or Tanzania? JICA from Japan. Do you know? And many of you here may have attended those seminars by JICA. How? How? Do you know who is sponsoring some of our education? Finland. And you attend courses in Helsinki. You know who supports our education? USAID, GIZ. How can you allow 60 years after we regained our independence for our education system to be controlled externally? Have the Americans ever invited you to examine the examination? Have the Koreans done so? Have the Japanese done so? Have the English done so? Have the Thais done so? No. The attitude is still condescending. You are treated like children of a lesser God and you accept it. We must style up. If we don't style up, we'll always be dominated. Today, if you look at our education system, whether it's in agriculture, across the continent of Africa, you know which university is teaching us dry land agriculture? Hebrew University from Israel. Israel is the size of one of our counties, Kiambu County. But who is teaching us? Hebrew University, teaching the University of Nairobi dry land agriculture. Who is teaching us environmental architecture? The University of Oslo in Norway. Who is teaching us about tropical medicine? The London University of Tropical Medicine. They have no malaria. They are teaching us how to treat malaria. You go to arbitration. An African lawyer from Botswana is happiest when he is a member of the Royal Institute of Arbitrators. It's a badge of honor. Inferiority complex. You go to Chartered Institute of Accountants. I am a member of the Royal Institute of Accountants. I'm a member of the Royal Institute of Surgeons. I'm a member of the Royal Institute of Psychiatrists. We Africans, when will we wake up? When will we wake up? When? The Chinese are no longer being dominated. They know what they want. Look at their school curriculum. Even the Chinese are now coming up here with Confucius Institutes. Tell me which major university in Africa does not have a Chinese Confucius Institute where Mandarin is being taught. And some of you are now beginning to say, ni hao. The Russians will come with their institute. They have now renamed the university Patrice Emery Lumumba University again to confuse us. You'll be saying, Das Vedanya. So you are here as experts, drawn from different countries. How many young men and women do we have who has been ostracized because we put the mark of Cain upon their heads, because they did not score an A, because they scored a D, because during that year it was government policy to only have so many A's. How many at the universities have we denied their rightful place because some lecturer, some professor who did not earn a first class says, no student can ever earn a first class if I did not earn a first class? How many? These are the questions that we must ask ourselves. How many have we condemned that they did not have talent while their talent was in tea testing? How many have we condemned and given D's and E's while their talent was in football, which is now a multi-billion-dollar economy in the world? The English Football League generates more money than the Republic of Rwanda any 1 year. How many? Through assessment. Today, we are gleefully saying that we are moving into competency-based. What were we doing all this while? What were we doing all this while that we have now recognized we are moving into something called competency-based? I'm being told that prior to that we were in content, not competence. I do not agree. We are confused. I look at schools even here in Nairobi, and I hope that you shall be taken to walk around the schools in Nairobi, the poorer parts of Nairobi. Whenever your guests lead you somewhere, lead into the next direction. Because what you are being shown by your host is normally the best to confuse and hoodwink you. Ask them to take you to school where we went with Barack Muluka and see no electricity for the last 1 year. Then you tell me competency-based? Then you tell me that we are in a technology, and you are persuaded by these government statistics of how many SCTs they are fixed. No. Governments in Africa are fond of misleading statistics. We must go behind the statistics and grapple with the reality. Ladies and gentlemen, we are talking about assessment. And you are in a privileged position, wherever you come from. If you are in South Africa, you'll be talking about matric. What are you matricing about? Is the school in Kostrad in Eastern Cape, does it have the same facilities as an urban school in Cape Town, and you are making them to sit the same examination? And then you grade them? The primary school in the poorest part of Banjul, the Gambia, is being made to sit the same examination as the best school in Banjul. The private schools in Dar es Salaam is sitting the same examination as a rural school in Mbeya in Tanzania. Are you being right? In Kampala, the private schools are sitting the same examination as some rural school in Soroti. And some private school in Bambane, in Eswatini, is sitting the same examination as a primary school in rural Eswatini, and a private school in Juba is sitting the same examination with the same school in Jonglei. Are we fair? Are we right? Are we comparing like with like? Why are we putting the mark of Cain upon the forehead of our young men and women? And you wonder why they are dying in the Mediterranean Sea? You wonder why they are dying off the coast of Senegal? Graduate engineers and agriculture students who cannot tell the difference between a goat and a sheep. Because you have told them that the only thing that you must do is to pass examinations. Obsession with examination. You should see in Kenya when examination results are announced, schools run around in town with twigs, celebrating the number of A's that have been scored. Is that what education is all about? Is that what grading is all about? Is that what assessment is all about? Do you not wonder that some of the greatest people who have discovered the greatest things are school dropouts? Do you wonder? Last week, I received a message from a Kenyan who holds a BEd degree, Bachelor of Education degree in Kenya. He cannot be registered by the Teacher Service Commission because several years ago, he scored a C, and the TSC says that you should have scored a C+. He's condemned for life. For life. Yet Ali Mazrui, one of the best minds that Africa has ever produced, scored a Division 3 and is the most celebrated African intellectual in the last century. Why do we condemn young people in that regard? Today, as you go back to your countries, go back to Accra, Ghana, and give meaning to these words of the Osagie for Kwame Nkrumah. Education is only education if it changes the person and helps that person to be a change agent in the society. Go back to Accra. Go back to Uganda and listen to Yoweri Kaguta Museveni as he talks about education. That education must make us independent. Go back to Dar es Salaam and give meaning to those words of Mwalimu Nyerere when he said he does not want education that makes a Tanzanian desire to leave Tanzania. Go back to Dar es Salaam. Go back to Zambia and listen to those words of Kenneth David Kaunda and hear him say, Zambia is only going to grow when we make the Zambian an agent of change and we use the education system to uncover and unleash his potential. Go back to the Gambia and listen to those immortal words spoken in 1967 by Dauda Kairaba Jawara. That Gambia is small, but if we have educated individuals, we can change her. Go back to South Sudan and give meaning to these words of John Garang Dimadior when he said, we have inherited no more than 10 graduates, but through education we are going to change South Sudan. Go back to Cameroon and remember these words of Amadou Ahidjo when he said, we have inherited a domineering education system from the French, which makes the Sorbonne our Mecca. Let us not make Sorbonne our Mecca. Let us make Yaoundé our intellectual Mecca. Go back to Cameroon. And one can say many things, but I'm today urging you, if you come from India, that great land of Mohandas Karamchand Gandhi, go back and listen to him talking about education. And one of the reasons why India is India, because Indian education is Indian education, which has borrowed from other civilizations. borrowing creatively, not swallowing line, hook, and sinker, which we do in Africa. Go back to Myanmar and do that which is good and right. And you are friends from other civilizations, whether from the United States of America or France or England. We welcome your ideas to the extent that we will make them be propagated in a manner that is suitable to our soils. This is to the extent that we welcome your contribution. And if you go beyond that, we will politely tell you, we do not need your help. We only need it to the extent that knowledge knows no boundaries, but knowledge is also important for purposes of ensuring that we develop our circumstances correctly. You know, Africa today, and I must conclude, has promised herself many things. Africa has promised herself under Africa Agenda 2063 that she is going to realize our potential. And if she is going to realize our potential, the key is education. If Africa is going to grow technologically, we must embrace the dividends of the fourth industrial revolution and the fifth industrial revolution. And it's through education that we are going to do it. You who are in the business of education, tell us how we are going to do it. The politician is looking to the next election. You are looking to the next generation. Tell us how we are going to do it. If we say that we are going to reduce maternal mortality and infant mortality, and we are going to train young men and women who are going to do this so that we have good labor, tell us how we are going to do it. Don't depend on government statistics. Those are lies 50% of the times. Go to the ground, and it is you educators who are going to help us. If we are going to be a continent that no longer exports raw materials, that is engaged in mining, those of you from the Democratic Republic of Congo, it is you educators that are going to produce those engineers. And those engineers are not going to be produced when we use machinery that was used in the 15th century. The task is big. Africa has promised herself. Africa has promised herself under the Africa Continental Free Trade Area that we want to remove tariff and non-tariff barriers. And one of the non-tariff barriers is the quality and equation of education. I want mobile labor. I want labor that is produced in Cameroon to be accepted as good labor in Bangui in Central African Republic. I do not want it to be said that a qualification from Bangui in Central African Republic cannot be understood in Eritrea. That is a non-tariff barrier. So go out there. Feel pain for your mother continent. Because if you don't feel pain for her, she'll be colonized again. If you do not feel pain for her, she'll be dominated again. If you do not feel pain for her, she'll be abused again. If you do not feel pain for her, her children will be hewers of wood and drawers of water again. So, go out there and use the knowledge that you have acquired across the continent, cross-fertilize your knowledge and cross-pollinate your knowledge in the knowledge that what you are going to do now is what is going to make Africa great. The Malawians have a saying, it is not our children that we consider precious, but our children's children. That is what we must consider now. On average, all of you who are present here in 40 years' time, you will have been migrated to heaven or hell, whichever you deserve. So I want you to think about the future people who will run this continent. So I conclude by saying, education is at the heart of development. Assessment and talent identification is at the heart of development. You are the men and women who have been charged with that task. Carry that task with humility. Carry that task with dedication. Carry that task in the knowledge that what you condemn will be condemned. Carry that task in the knowledge that you can do better. Carry that task in the knowledge that God has given you great responsibility. Africa can be great, and Africa will only be a good citizen of the world if she is self-confident. She'll only be a good citizen of the world if she is self-assured. She'll only be a good citizen of the world when she has knowledge that allows her to be agile. That is the Africa that I look for. That is the world that I look for. That is the world that we must work for. And ultimately, I conclude with these great words of South Africa's Robert Sobukwe. When he was asked in 1961, what do you think about the different races in the world? He said, there is only one race in the world, the human race. God bless. My thoughts have been summarized here, so you'll get them.
Can we give him another round of applause? Ladies and gentlemen, I have nothing to say because I'm not qualified to add anything to what he has said. But if you ask me, what did you understand from the lecture he had just delivered? That is, he spoke extempore, and he has really shown that he's a master of the game. Personally, I understood him to have said that what we are having today in Africa is colonized and neo-colonized education. Neocolonialism is the higher form of colonialism. The history of education is the history of disruption of education in Africa by the colonialists. They colonized, disrupted, and confused our education. He made mention of UI being established and tailored after the University of London and some other universities in Africa. He caused all this miseducation of the people. And he advised us to take the words of Dr. Nkrumah when he said, use education to create a new African land and a new African mind. Education is the very heart of a changed society. Education decides how we move and the direction in which we move. Education revolutionizes society. Education changes the mind. Education was designed to make the African an instrument of colonial administration. The inferiority complex is still alive and ravaging. It calls for reorientation, otherwise there will be no change. There is a total domination of the mind and the psyche of the African child. The problem of Africa lies in professionalism or the cowardice of professionals. Confused and confusing. People who have no ideas are controlling education. Reform commissions upon reform commissions without implementation or haphazard implementation taken without interrogation. How can we allow our education to be controlled externally? The system is still condescending. We are victims of inferiority. Africans must wake up. African governments confuse us with statistics. We must go beyond statistics and grapple with reality. It is unfair to subject all children from different educational backgrounds to the same test, to the same assessment. We must look beyond external interventions and look inwards. Ladies and gentlemen, there can be no better way of looking at education in Africa. He has also admonished us that assessment and education should not be about the number of A's scored by the child. It is about changing the mind. This, of course, he calls another form of distortion. Education is only education if it changes the person and helps to make him a change agent in the society. Only education can change our minds, our psyche, and ultimately change the society. Yes, we can welcome foreign ideas, foreign contributions, but we must make them to suit our environment. If Africa must realize its potential and achieve technological growth and development, it is through education. We must use education to change the society. Don't rely on government statistics again, he warned. It's all lies. Feel pain for your country, or else you'll be colonized again, or recolonized, dehumanized, and dominated. Education is the heart of development. We want all of us as Africans to be self-confident and knowledgeable, to be citizens of the world. Has he or has he not spoken? He has spoken. Thank you very much.
Very good. I don't think that I have anything to add. If I should say anything beyond what has been said, I adulterate a good thing. And therefore, let me not say anything, except to request that we clap for him again. Thank you very much. And I want to thank the delegates. You know, this is a very disciplined forum, and that is what you get when you have educators under one roof. This is in spite of the fact that we have been miseducated and confused. At least we know how to keep time. So that one we can celebrate. And living here now, there are delegates here, quite a good number, who have not yet registered. We will use some of the time that we have gained for that purpose. We will also use some of the time that we have gained for photography. We are going to have a number of photographs. I believe the photographers are out there and ready for their piece of the action. And lunch will be taken anytime after midday. We know the regular place for lunch. It will be indicated and marked as belonging to Aeaa. Thereafter, at 2 o'clock pronto, because we have a bit of latitude now, we should go to the breakaway sessions. 3 of them are going to be within what is now this room. We are going to dismember it into 3, and there will be 3 different sessions here. There are ushers who are going to help to lead us. Where are the ushers? Ushers, where are you? Let's just have one of you come here so that the delegates can see your likeness. The ushers look like this. Yeah? This is one of the ushers. Usher, approach. Usher, say something about how you are going to usher and where you will take them.
Thank you, our Master of Ceremony, and good morning, delegates. Our lunch will be served at the Nyamachoma restaurant, so start growing the appetite for it. And we'll be ushering you. You'll find us at strategic positions to show you the way. Our gents are also dressed in the same colors, so any assistance, we are ready to accord it to you. Thank you, and karibuni sana. Thank you.
Very good. Thank you very much. So I think we are in safe hands. We are in a good place. And let me wish you very good deliberations. Later on in the evening, we will have dinner. And where's the dinner going to be served? The courtesy dinner? Yeah, we will be told where the dinner is going to be served. Yes, sir. They're saying the professor has been made to sit, and they had a few questions. On popular demand, so you come back. And I disengage, CEO, I'm otherwise guided, and I accept the guidance. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Dr. Jacob Ekele is my name.
I think
National
we'll allow
Examinations
the
Council.
chair to continue with this session.
Please go on.
Yeah, Dr. Jacob Ekele is my name. National Examinations Council, NECO, Nigeria. Sir, I commend Professor's paper very well. As an assessment industry, I score you A1, but you raised an issue that needed further provocation. You raised the issue at the moment all of us know that we get the same assessment to all our candidates, both in the rural area, in the urban, in the federal government colleges, as well as big private schools, we give them the same assessment, which you have faulted. However, you have not provided a solution on how we should assess these various cadres of students. Please, it's a food for thought, and I'll be happy if you can also contribute to how we can assess these cadres. At the moment, we assess them equally. Thank you, sir.
Let me, Dr. Njegere David, who is the chairman of NEC, and I had a very long discussion on this subject. And these were my thoughts without being an expert. But I taught at the university for almost 25 years, and I used to assess students. And this is what I shared with Dr. Njegere. I said, why should a candidate who is studying mathematics for the purpose of becoming an engineer be assessed at the same level as a teacher who is going to teach kindergarten? And then, having assessed them at that level of mathematics for engineers, you then award them D, and the engineering student scores A, and this D becomes an albatross around their neck throughout their life. Is it not possible to have a system that talks about mathematics for kindergarten teachers and therefore assess them at that level. And I think that that is possible, because I remember when we were students of mathematics, there was something that was called mathematics. I think we went through SSP at one time. Then there was additional maths for the students who had excelled in maths, and further maths. And I hold the view that it may appear expensive on its face, but it's necessary because you are dealing with people's lives. Today, for example, when I look at the way people used to graduate to become lawyers in this country, when the British left, there were no more than 10 lawyers in this country, and people became lawyers through a system called articled clerkship. You started as an articled clerk, and then you became a lawyer. And the very first lawyers to be admitted at the University of Nairobi was in 1970. The rest of them went to the University of Dar es Salaam. And one of the articled clerks later became a judge of the Court of Appeal in this country and was one of the better judges. If you use this one-size-fits-all grading system, he would have been condemned as a failure. And I say this without being an expert like you who are dealing with assessment on a daily basis, that the time is now to really begin to look at how we assess. And one of the things, and permit me to give myself a little latitude, when you drive around any African country today, there is a lot of construction, infrastructure going on. And what is most amazing is that on site, invariably, they are Chinese. What became of our civil engineers that we have trained in the thousand over the years? What became of them? These first-class engineering students, what became of them? Not so long ago, my own country was involved in a dispute on delimitation of the exclusive economic zone between us and Somalia. They are experts on the law of the sea, including myself. That is my PhD area of study, delimitation and utilization of the exclusive economic zone. My government hired a Frenchman, and they lost. And you see that invariably. I'm saying this because assessment is what leads to competence. But I'm saying you who are professionals, I'm not the professional. This is the work that you do on a daily basis. Have differential assessment. These young people who are here, you know, we used to call this thicker school for the blind. We now call it thicker school for the visually impaired. And I now know lawyers who are visually impaired. And when they were sitting their examinations, we would be given 2 hours, they would be given 4 hours. Because you are not dealing like with like. We are able to read, but they are not. They are using Braille. That is what I am asking for. Some student who is suffering from cerebral palsy, and one of them I know who is differently assessed, is now one of the leading in strategy at the Kenya Communications Authority. Cerebral palsy. In your typical traditional assessment, he is condemned. And I'm suggesting that something must be done. It can be expensive, and it will be expensive, but why shouldn't we bear that burden? Today, when I walk in the morning at 5, I see young pupils going to school buses, at 5 a.m., which means they must have woken up at 4 a.m. If you look at the education system in countries that have changed, such as South Korea and Finland, the concept of homework disappeared. But because we are drilling people to get into this space, I've answered the question in a far too lengthy way, but what I'm saying, the time is now. You are from Nigeria, and I've been into rural Nigeria. I've been to Anambra, I've been to Ife, I've been to Delta State, I've been to Lafia, I've been to all those places. So, some rural school in Lafia, or around Lafia, is being graded in the same way as the old Methodist school. I've made my point.
Okay, yeah, you are recognized. Please get him one of the microphones. All right.
Good morning, Professor, and the president of this organization. I'm Sulaiman Adeguke from National Examination Council, Nigeria. Prof, we have few of you who are courageous and fearless in Africa. Our problem, as you have said, is our political leaders. Up to now, since independence in various countries, we are still being colonized politically, economically, socially, educationally. There are few leaders, political leaders, who wanted to break from the past, but they don't last in power. So how do we solve this problem? Prof, thank you very much.
Let me look at it from an education standpoint. When we regained independence, the examination system in East Africa was one. In fact, when I sat for my O-level, it was the East African Certificate of Education. The same examination in Uganda, Kenya, and Tanzania, which meant that when I qualified, I could join the university at Makerere, at Dar es Salaam, and at Nairobi. In 1970, we broke the University of East Africa into University of Nairobi, Makerere University, and University of Dar es Salaam. Now we know, under the East African University Council of Education, we want to go back to the past because we made a mistake. And why do I say this? Education is very important in terms of mobility of labor. You want a doctor who was qualified in Uganda to come and practice in Kenya without further examination, because you can equate. But today, in Kenya, for example, because we have been changing our education system more than we change our undergarments, I can tell you for a fact now, a Kenyan student, and those of you from South Africa know when they go to University of Witwatersrand or University of Pretoria or Cape Town, which we send students to, when they go down to equation, they say they don't understand our system. Right now, we are migrating to CBC, a good system on paper. But will the graduate from CBC be a graduate who is understood at the University of Dar es Salaam? We are confusing. And because we are divided, we are easy to deal with. In West Africa, if you look at the WAEC, assuming there was an examination system that covered, because of language, that covered Ghana, covered Liberia, covered Sierra Leone, covered Nigeria. And they did the same examination system. First of all, mobility of labor. And so, assuming the 14 so-called Francophone countries also had a single examination system, then mobility of labor. Because Europe and America particularly, look at America, it's a country, it's a single country, but if you compare it to Africa, it is 50 countries in one. But a graduate from Boston in Massachusetts is treated in the same way as a graduate from the University of Berkeley at California. One country, one system. That is what you need, mobility. Look at China. Right now in my law office, I have 3 people who have come from Sudan. They are doing something in my office. They are now refugees because of war. They are university professors. They don't know what to do because Kenyan system does not recognize their PhDs. From Sudan, 2 hours flight. They have now been rendered useless. We are weak because we are divided. So we must move in the context of the many organizations, and I know that there is the East African University, the University Council, I know there is something in West Africa, I know there is something in Southern Africa. You who are the front players in this direction, you may not see the fruits of your labor in your lifetime, but begin pushing us in that direction. Begin pushing us in that direction so that the policy makers can begin to see this. And if they don't see it now, they'll see it. Because if you do that, then we are united. Today, this is what happens, and I conclude. Burundi is a member of the East African community. But if you go to Burundi now, most of the education programs in Burundi are being funded by Belgium. And there is no free lunch. The Belgians are funding the Burundians because they want to create connectivity which will have trade implications. And I do not begrudge them, because they do what is in their best interest. So it will make it difficult for Burundi to integrate into the East African system. The same thing with the Democratic Republic of Congo. The same thing with Somalia, which has joined us. But if we moved as one, it would be very easy, even in terms of having reciprocal recognition. Today, you are a doctor, you go to the United Kingdom, you are subjected to such examination, even on tropical medicine. In England, they'll subject you to examination. But suppose we had reciprocity and told the English, our doctor is good for all East Africa. You are free to test them, but test them as East Africans, having gone through a similar education system. What I'm saying, our weakness is our penchant to move in small silos. Eswatini. Now, Eswatini, which I like, is holding a bilateral meeting with the United States of America. Mwalimu Nyerere used to say that even in boxing, the game is boxing. But when you now want people to fight, you don't say they are all boxers. You don't take me, I don't know who is big here, who is, so that I compare with myself. Now, you take one of the biggest people in the room and you put us in the same boxing ring, a lightweight and a heavyweight, and you say it is boxing. Nyerere used to say, that is murder. You must take a featherweight and a featherweight. So Eswatini with the United States of America negotiating bilaterally is a joke. It's a complete joke. They'll give you all the trappings, but it's a complete joke. But suppose it was West Africa. Suppose it was ECOWAS. Then you are beginning to negotiate. Because now you are talking about population of 400 million with a GDP of nearly 1 trillion. And that is why, therefore, you see periodically, and I'm now becoming like a Pentecostal preacher. I'm ending now. But periodically you now see, because we are disunited, you see 54 African countries they say they are invited. I normally don't say that. I say they are summoned. Recently, the last summons was in St. Petersburg. 17 attended. Then they'll be summoned to Beijing. It would be easier for Xi Jinping to come to Addis Ababa and meet us here. But you know why we are summoned? Because we are weak. You know why Confucius centers are now coming here? All of the universities in your country, I said it a little earlier, University of Nairobi, I hope you'll be shown the Confucius Center. And you know what language they are encouraging the middle class to learn? Mandarin. Mandarin. So all of us, as I said, ni hao, chang chang, chang. Soon our children will be baptized Mao Zedong and that kind of thing. And I say this in jest, but I am also speaking about it seriously. The more disunited we are, the more susceptible to manipulation we are. And I conclude by repeating again, please, let us begin to make these Pan-African issues. And in the next 10 years, I'm being modest, possibly we'll move towards a closer African approach the languages we use notwithstanding. Right now, as I speak, we are still Anglophone, we are still Francophone, we are still Lusophone, and in the Maghreb, they are Arabophone. And now we are even beginning to talk about Sinophone. I've answered your question. Thank you.
Thank you very much once again. I think this is where we are going to draw the curtain. One of the ways out of our educational quagmire is unification of the educational system in our various sub-regions. And this is why the template of the West African Examinations Council very well recommends itself to the other regions of Africa. Thank you. This is where we are drawing the curtain. Let's go for our lunch. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Photographs out there, and those not registered, please remember to do so. Thank you very much, and see you in the breakaway sessions. Thanks so much.